Morning. Just getting set up. We're going to start in a couple minutes. Welcome to Willow's Green Permaculture Live. Got my notes because there's so many questions to answer. I'm doing this with my cell phone because it's easier. Next time maybe I'll do it with my computer and I can do it horizontal. I see God picks the kings there. Good morning. And Guru Ethereal, good morning to you too. Welcome to our live chat. Give it another minute. Good morning. Skincare Garden Care V from Northern Nevada. Welcome. Hello, Eddie from Alabama. We're about to start. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Let's see if I can also connect here. Not sure. Right. Okay. Yep. Great. Yeah, now I'm connected on my phone. Oh, there's Magali. Hello, Magali. Magali's right here helping me. Okay, it's 10 o'clock. Let's get started. Well, welcome to Willow's Green Permaculture. We're doing our very first live stream ever. We're going to answer lots of your questions. And so if this is something you're interested in, then let's get started. Hello, James from Thunder Bay. Oh, nice to see you. Okay, let's go. So I'll say, well, how I'm going to do this morning, I've got some of the questions that you already sent me. I'm going to answer one of those, and then I'll answer a question that maybe one of you give me right now, and then I'll go back and forth, and then I'll go to one of the prepared questions and so on. Okay? So, let's go. For the very first thing I'd like to talk about, the first two subjects I'm going to talk about are learning from failures and experimentation, and the second one is fast-growing perennials, because those seem to be a couple of the subjects that are really, really popular. And so, for example, first I'd like to talk about learning from failures, because the thing is, the way we've been doing things here, I'm a lifelong teacher, and so it's important to experiment. It's important to learn, and it's important to realize that there are many ways of doing things. Nature is so biodiverse, so vast, so simply just incredible that there are as many ways of doing things as there are species that exist in the world. And so it's important to experiment. But when we experiment, sometimes things go wrong. But I'd like to tell you about my very first failure, and it was as a kid. As a kid, small kid, let's say, I thought I couldn't garden because I had a garden for years. I loved doing it. I did it with one of my brothers, but it never really did well compared to the gardens that I would look at it in the neighborhood and so on. Where, I was like between 7 and 12 years old, let's say, when I was doing this, but I loved doing it anyways. And to make a long story short, when I was a young adult and I moved to a new place while I was studying, and there happened to be a garden there, and I said, oh, I'm going to try planting it. Let's see if I have some luck now. And everything grew like crazy. And it was then that I realized that as a kid, I was too shy to bother to ask, why isn't my garden growing well? And it's the reason why my garden wasn't growing well as a kid was because I had put it in the wrong spot. It was up against a north-facing wall. The west was blocked by a big deck. The east was blocked by the neighboring house. All it got was northern exposure. And then, as an adult, I learned by accident. And from that point on, when I realized that gardening was basically so easy, that's when I started to teach it. And that happened back in 1990. So that was 35 years ago. Yeah, 35 years ago. So and I haven't stopped since. And so I started teaching kids and all the rest of it. Now, another mistake that I used to believe, let's say, when before we came here, was that it's not good to put a garden in a spot that's really wet. It takes a long time to dry. Like it takes until July before it dries, because I thought you couldn't garden in places like that. Um, because obviously it takes a long time to you plant right in there. It takes a long time to cool off. Takes a long time to dry. All of that water, the plants can't develop their roots and so on. But then what I learned here when I started doing it, because this place was full of water, and if I hadn't learned it, then we wouldn't have been able to work with this place, was you can build on top of the wet spots, and then what you got is a place that you'll never have to water. And what I mean by building on top of it is, and I've talked about this in videos, is making hugelkultures or a chinampa, basically putting sticks and organic matter on top of that wet spot so that it sits on top of it thick enough, and then on top of that you put compost, organic material, and so on, and eventually you plant into that, and the roots go down and make their way to the water, and it's a place you never have to water. And you know, this summer we've been going through a drought. We've had about 3 rains in the last month, and if you look behind me, you see that? That's this is our septic area, and there's grass, and you can see the grass is brown and dead, and our gardens would be that too if but our gardens are green and lush, and we don't have to water them because they have access to that water down below. Okay, next, let's go on to the next subject. Actually, there are many things I learned of, but the first thing I want to talk about right now is are the fast-growing perennials that you should start with if you're going to want to start a food forest and you want your food to come back for you every year. There are some species that you plant them once and you almost never have to think about them again. And one of the most important ones in there is elderberry. Now, elderberry likes it a little bit wet, so if you've got some wet spots, then plant it there. Now, if you don't have wet spots, it does tolerate dry spots, but it takes longer to grow. And elderberry, you can propagate it using cuttings. Our huge elderberry forest, which gives us enough elderberries for the whole year, we started with 8 sticks. 8 branches, 8 cut branches that were about this long, and you can check out the video from the fall of 2023 to learn more about that. Other plants that are really great to start with are sunflowers. They're not perennial, but they self-seed profusely, especially if you grow them and you let at least, let's say, 2 or 3 of them stay in place and let the animals do with them what they want. The animals will spread those seeds around for you, and you'll have sunflowers coming back every year all over the place. Another one that's really great, very healthy, is stinging nettle. Once you've planted that, you basically won't be able to get rid of it. And basically what you got is spinach all spring, and you've also got a medicinal plant. And I've got a video coming out next week, a very interesting video about nettles coming out next week. And however, don't put stinging nettle in your vegetable garden. If you don't want to have to be tearing it out a lot, because it really spreads. But you do put it in areas that you want to build the soil, that you're maybe not going to put most of your vegetables in, and it'll spread and it'll help you build the soil. Another one that's just like that is sunchokes, or Jerusalem artichokes. They're another one you don't want to put in your garden. You want to put somewhere where you want to build the soil, and you plant them once, and you got a crop every single year, year after year after year, plus beautiful flowers, and they attract pollinators. Another great one that grows quickly and is very independent is wild grape. Wild grape is maybe not as sweet as cultivar grapes, but it is amazing, and it's full of flavor, and it will, once you've got wild grape growing, it will just keep spreading for you and spreading for you, and you will have huge harvests of wild grapes that will last you all winter. Another one is lamb's quarters. Lamb's quarters is very healthy. It's just like spinach. If you have some grass and you let some of your grass stop cutting some of that grass and just let whatever grows there grow, what we call no-mow zone, you're sure to have probably lamb's quarters and yarrow growing in there. And lamb's quarters, the leaves are edible like spinach, but the seeds are just like quinoa. And in fact, they're in the same family as quinoa, because lamb's quarters and quinoa and epazote in Mexico. All three of those plants, they're all in the Chenopodum family. Amaranth is another one that'll come back every year. Very, very healthy. You can use the seeds, you can use the leaves. Um, Also, mint is another one, really important, but don't put it in your garden if you want to save yourself some trouble. Use it to build your soil, though. Asparagus and rhubarb, of course, are two others that are really, really great for coming back every year. Okay, now, well, let's see if there's a question that someone just asked now that I can answer. And while I'm waiting for that question,
Okay, so
just want to say hello to it. There, hello, Earthy Heart Artist. Welcome.
I'm going to give you a question.
Yep.
One person, skincare garden carrot.
Yep.
She said, can't get stinging needle to even start from seed.
Okay. Well, you know what? If you're within mailing distance from me, which I mean, really, if I've mailed stuff to the U.S. I haven't mailed anything outside of North America yet, but perhaps I could. I could get. What's best to start with is a root, and a root would survive mailing, because stinging nettle, you could practically keep the root on the pavement for a week and it'll survive once you've planted it again. Another food plant that comes back every year that you can do the same with is daylilies, emerocallis. The roots of those, I remember one time I planted some. I had been looking at them. Someone had thrown them out on the curb, and I'd been watching them for about 2 weeks as I biked back and forth from work, from school. And after about 2 weeks, I said, no, I have to take those. And I took them 2 weeks later, planted them, and they grew great. So maybe I can mail you some. Was there any other questions?
No, right now you can continue.
Okay, so let's go on to some other species that are really good that come back quite readily, or that are fast perennial growing. For instance, if you're looking for nuts, hazelnuts are excellent. We planted ours 5 years ago, and we started having a harvest 3 years ago. So 2 years later, and now and last year and the year before we had quite a nice harvest, and this year we're gonna have a really, really big harvest. And this is from, initially we got our harvest from about 4 hazelnut bushes, and but we have a total of 8, and now we're starting to get a harvest from all of them. And they're in different growing conditions. Some are in wet, some are in dry, and they're all producing. So they're a very versatile plant. Now others are blackcap raspberries. Now we didn't plant any of ours. What we did when we came here was we planted native shrubs, native flowers, native trees. That was the first thing we did to attract the wildlife, because all we had was grass here. And by attracting the wildlife helped us plant our gardens for us. And so starting about 3 years ago, we've had blackcap raspberries all winter because of the fact that the birds planted them for us here. Another one is raspberries. Blackberries is another good one, but if you can get the kind that aren't thorny, they'll save you a lot of trouble, and they're a little bit less, let's say, spreading, less aggressive. Although if you want something to build your soil, then the native thorny blackberries will definitely do that if it's in an area, but you wouldn't want to put native thorny blackberries right beside your garden, because you're going to be pulling them out all the time, and they're going to be thorny and a little bit difficult. The non-thorny blackberries are a bit more useful for that purpose, and they come back really quickly. They spread very quickly, so they're going to give you lots and lots of food. Haskaps are another good one. Currants, gooseberries, I mentioned elderberry already, and some of the vegetables that self-seed quite easily. Well, there's ground cherry, that's more like a fruit, but it's in the tomato family. That self-seeds really readily and gives you lots of food. Potatoes come back every year, most of the time, in most conditions, if you simply don't harvest them all, and it's always impossible to harvest them all, or if you throw some back in as you're harvesting. Tomatoes are another one that's self-seed. Dill, lettuce, mustard, kale. Now the dill, the lettuce, and the kale, obviously you need to let them go to seed if you want them to self-seed. So those are some of the best ones for getting started, for giving you food every year, and then you can start experimenting with some of the stuff that you really like that maybe doesn't necessarily come back every year. Now, Let's go to some of the some advice about once again learning from failures or experimentation. One thing I noticed, I love to grow corn. I love to grow the Three Sisters. I think they're not only beautiful and they help me teach about biodiversity, they help me teach about companion planting, and which is a simplified way of biodiversity in a garden. However, the thing about corn is, and beans too to a certain extent, but more corn. Corn are a real wildlife magnet. So the corn that we grow attracts the deer and it attracts the raccoons. And raccoons especially can really cause a mess in your garden. And so this year we finally decided to stop planting the corn inside our main garden. And what we do is we plant it way out back, at the complete opposite end of the property from the garden. We've got Three Sisters areas with a whole bunch of corn and beans and squash planted, and they're not particularly protected apart from with the squash. And so some animals might eat in there, but maybe not. It's easier for them to access, so they're going to be attracted there rather to our garden. And usually by now we have a lot of raccoons in our garden in the first couple of weeks of July. We have had a few. They've been after our raspberries, but they haven't explored inside the garden. Even though we have sorghum in there, which looks like corn, obviously the raccoons can smell that it's not corn, and so they don't go after the sorghum. And so that's been really great. And the thing is, however, if you do have wildlife going after your corn, especially if it's deer, deer aren't going to tear your plants down. They're just going to maybe eat a few of your cobs. Don't cut that stalk down if they've eaten a couple of your cobs, because as long as the stalk's still alive, those cobs, the deer will have eaten it green, and so the stalks will know that they haven't created seed yet, and they're going to grow some more ears. They might be a bit smaller because they'll have less time, but that's a piece of advice for corn.
And there is a question.
Yes. Okay. Another question.
There is a question about Sue. She's not able to grow hazelnuts.
Hazelnuts. Yeah.
Hazelnut, and she thinks that it's related to the wildlife. So, do you have a kind of other suggestion for her?
Okay. Thank you, Susan, for your question. Definitely, wildlife can be a challenge. Before I make other suggestions for you, besides the hazelnuts, what I'd like to tell you is try and plant as much as you can in any space you have away from the things that you're growing for food, like hazelnuts or your regular garden. For instance, like you saw, we have grass back here, but 90% of the grass that existed here is gone because we created gardens, but not only gardens, we created what we call no-mow zones, or we simply let the forest take over. We stopped mowing, and no-mow zone is you stop mowing, it's still kind of like a prairie habitat. Other stuff grows. The wildlife prefer their native fruit and nuts and so on over what we grow. Now, hazelnuts obviously are probably irresistible. Probably it's squirrels that are going after them. So what I might suggest, however, one thing that's irresistible to squirrels are sunflowers. So see if you can plant a lot of sunflowers not far from your hazelnut. The squirrels might go after those instead. Now, if you want to grow your protein and you're not getting it enough through the hazelnuts or other nuts, which also can tend to take a long time to grow, what I suggest is you grow a lot of beans. But obviously you grow them for green beans. But what I'm saying is, for instance, what we do is we harvest our green beans in August, but we stop harvesting near the end of August because we want all the rest of those beans that are growing to eventually ripen and dry so that we have beans. And so we harvested about 20 jars, about that big, that wide, of beans. We harvest about that much every year, and that's a lot of protein. Peas as well, amaranth seed as well. There are lots of different seeds actually that you can grow that will give you lots of protein. Now, as soon as there's another question, Magali, you let me know. I'm going to go on with some of the other advice of things that I've learned over the years. One vegetable that I've always had a bit of difficulty with getting them to grow really well are onions. But the first thing I'd like to say is, I suppose I thought they weren't growing well only because I had these unrealistic expectations caused by the grocery store, caused by these vegetables that are grown with in all sorts of conditions with all sorts of fertilizers and pesticides and all the rest of it, making these monster vegetables. And so that's the first thing you kind of got to get out of your head. When you're growing natural, it's going to look different from the grocery store, but the flavor is going to be 10 times, 20, 50, 100 times better, and so are the properties. And so at first I thought, wow, why are my onions so small? Well, they're small because they're more normal. However, what I have learned over the years, though, is onions, they've got shallow roots, and so they don't compete well with weeds, with weeds. I don't really like the word weeds because pretty well everything's useful. They don't compete well with the other plants that end up growing there, and if you're not on top of keeping those out, your onions are going to get choked out. And this year, what I tried, and it's really, really, really working, is I've planted onions with carrots, and because carrots also are like onions, they don't like competition not because they have shallow roots. They obviously have deep roots, but carrots are extremely slow growing. And so by planting the carrots and the onions together, the carrots have been able to develop well, but they never shade out those onions. And the other thing I've done with the carrots, you may have seen in our instant garden video, I planted some directly into some straw bales that were still intact. And now this wasn't maybe the year to try it because we haven't had rain, and where I did that we don't water. And so the onions grew for a while, and then when it stopped raining, they just stopped growing. However, the carrots kept growing. And I still got some onions harvested from there, but in the other instant garden, which eventually you'll see the update of, the onions are doing really well, and so are the carrots. And by the way, the carrots are doing really well in that straw bale garden, even though it's dry as bone. And then in our main garden, where we planted onions and carrots into the ground, they're also doing really well. Now I mixed the carrot seed into sand to help pre-thin it. Next year I think I'll mix sand right into the area where I planted. And I did have to keep on top of some of the quote-unquote weeds in those carrots and onions. But however, we ate them because they were what's called the sow thistle. And it's in the lettuce family, and I picked it while it was always when it first appeared, and it was delicious. It fed us for about a month, and picking that, now our onions and our carrots are doing really well. Was there another question coming?
Your family, they ask, I am in all sand really. No matter what I do to the soil, my broccoli and cauliflower always bolt up. So they need an advice for that.
Okay, so you're in sandy soil, I think.
Yes.
I understood.
Yes.
Okay, and yeah, so your soil obviously is well drained. The carrots would like it, but yes, broccoli and cauliflower, like cabbage, even though they need to germinate in heat to develop well, they kind of like it a little bit cooler. And so what you need to try and do is cool your soil down as much as possible. And how you're going to do that is by putting as much organic matter on there as possible. And this is interesting because you see, for the last several years, I've been getting mushroom compost to add to my garden, which I mostly do either in the fall and in the spring. But you see, we obviously want to be completely independent, completely autonomous, and so we want to generate our organic matter ourselves. And we just needed to do a lot of soil building because it was very depleted when we first came here. But now we've got this huge forest all around us, and we have a lot of organic material. And so what I'm going to be doing in the fall on many of my gardens, especially the ones that are inside or close to the forest, is I'm going to be pollarding. I'm going to be cutting down branches of species that easily grow back so long as you don't obviously cut the root out. I'm talking about alder, willow, poplar, and there are many more, and I'll speak more about that in a minute because someone had a question about that. And I'm going to be, in the fall, I'm going to be cutting those and laying those branches down thickly on top of the garden. And normally what I'll do is I'll get bags and bags and bags of leaves that people put on their curb in the fall. And I may still do that. But I want to do it from our own stuff. And so I'm going to lay all those branches down through the fall, and they're going to be full of their leaves, and then they're going to stay there until it's time to plant in late spring or whenever in spring. And when it's time to plant, I'm just going to take those and pull them off the garden, either put them just around the contour or in the pathways through the garden, or I'll throw them onto my chinampa and they'll be already partially decomposed. Because they're branches, I don't want to leave them there. It's going to be hard for the vegetables to grow through. But whatever other stuff was in there, the leaves and so on, will stay. And one great thing to use is leaf mulch in the fall. You cover your gardens with it, and if possible, you leave it on there in the spring, and you move the leaves a little, you plant in there, and you put them back. And actually, speaking of that, I'd like to say that one really great strategy for getting your plants to grow faster and to get, let's say, a real head start ahead of the weeds is by doing starts. And you don't need necessarily a greenhouse to do starts ahead of time, because people think they need to get everything in so early, but you can do starts either inside your house or even outside your house, so long as obviously you're not going below freezing. But you see, if you start your plants ahead of time in small pots, and then you let them grow to a certain height, you'd say 4 to 6 inches high, around 10 centimeters high, and then you transplant those into the garden. You prepare your garden, you clear away all the weeds, you transplant that in, and then your vegetables will have a head start and shade out the weeds. Now there's some that you don't need to do that with. Corn, beans, and squash are the main ones. There are others. Pole beans, corn, squash, pumpkins, cucumbers, carrots. Well, carrots are a different sort of matter, but mustard, dill, nasturtium, calendula, borage, barley, buckwheat, wheat, oats, all that stuff you can direct sow and it grows real fast. Apart from those, pretty well everything else I start ahead of time. So it's important to know how much you need so that you're not doing too many starts, which has always been my problem and then next year I'm planning on knowing exactly how many plants I need, and I'm only going to start about 10% more. Okay, another question.
Yes. So I have started my perennial garden with a carpet of mixed clover. Should I chop and drop that clover and plant, or plant amongst it?
Okay, your clover, I would suggest you chop and drop it, because all the beneficial elements that are going to be in those leaves and stems and so on are going to decompose and feed your vegetables. Because you also don't want your clover to strangle your vegetables. And many people, they will plant clover in the fall or in the late summer into fall, and it'll grow and it'll basically die off in the winter. But if you see it growing in the spring, yes, chop and drop it before you put your vegetables in, because then it's going to be a little bit counterproductive. And then that's basically and clover, I believe, is a nitrogen fixer, and so it will fix nitrogen into the soil, and also it will be in its leaves and branches and stems, and that's going to feed your vegetables. Were there any other questions?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So Kara says, can you tell us more about poplars?
Poplars.
Yes.
Sure. Poplars are great because they're easy to grow and they're really fast growers. So if you want some trees to grow quickly, poplars are a good choice. Poplars, you can also pollard them, and you can also propagate them with cuttings, along with sycamore and willow and so many other trees. Now, the one disadvantage about most kinds of poplars, regular, poplar we have here, we've got trembling aspens, which are a type of poplar. You can hear their leaves are trembling right now, actually. The only problem with poplars is they're short-lived. They live 20-25 years. They grow real tall, and then after 25 years, they're ready to fall. And so you have to be, if you want to grow them big and tall, then you have to be ready in 25 years to maybe cut them down, or 20 years. Now, if you're growing them because you want fast firewood, you want to either coppice or pollard them. And this was a question that I'm going to answer right now. Someone asked, what's the difference between coppicing and pollarding? and what are good species to do that with. Coppicing and pollarding, what they have in common is you take a live tree and you cut it in order to harvest the branches and so on, and then it regrows very quickly. Now, the difference is coppicing, you're doing that at ground level, just above ground level, let's say, or right at ground level. And pollarding, think pole, that might help you remember it, pole for pollarding. Pollarding, you're gonna do that at a certain height, let's say maybe chest height, whatever is the easiest height for you to be trimming the tree at. So you basically trim it, and you know, your first harvest, you trim that tree there, and then the following year you're gonna have all sorts of branches coming out depending on the species. And poplar is one of those species. Alder is another one. Elderberry, obviously, you can do that with. Willow is another one. I've got a whole list of them here. Hold on, let me see if I can. Poplar, willow, dogwood, buckthorn, although that's invasive. We have no choice. We've been coppicing it because it's invasive and we prefer to get rid of it. But we coppice it, we cut it at ground level every winter, and we use all that material for soil building and so on. Although we have to dry it first, that buckthorn. Ash and elder are also good choices. You know, ash and elder both have problems with elder with Dutch elm disease, and ash with the emerald ash borer. But the thing is, both of those things, they kill the top of the tree, let's say from the trunk up. But generally, the bottom is still alive. And so ash is a good choice to coppice, especially if the top's died on you, because you cut it down and you're going to see all sorts of growth coming out from the roots, and it's going to keep coming. We've got a mature elder right now that 4 years ago died, and we cut it down, and now it's just beautiful.
Questions?
Yes, another question.
Yeah. So they are talking about that the birds, they are eating some flowers of the squash.
Yeah.
So they
Wow.
ask if they have to cover them with a kind of netting. What do you recommend?
Okay. I'm not sure it's the birds that are eating it. You might have bugs eating it. We have lots and lots and lots of birds here, and I don't see them eating the squash flowers. However, you can put roll covering on your squash, but you may if you do that, you're gonna have to hand pollinate your squash, and I can show that how to do that in a video. And the other challenge with using a roll cover on anything is you're protecting any bugs that might come from the ground or the ground up or get underneath there. You're protecting them from their predators, and so you may do more damage than good. You're also going to have a little bit less air circulation, a little bit less water getting to the ground, even if your roll covers allow water to get through and air to get through and so on. We've been here for 5 years. 5.5 years, I've never once used roll cover, and in fact, I attract the birds to my garden because we've got lots and lots of bugs, and the birds help us control them. I also attract frogs and toads. If you can attract frogs and toads with logs and with leaf mulch or wood chips on the outside of your garden, that will be very, very helpful. And so that's my advice. And once again, plant some native shrubs that the birds will prefer to eat from. And once again, and the same thing with the coppicing and the pollarding, the native shrubs, obviously they're going to be different depending on your region. And so to finish my answer about the coppicing and the pollarding, about the choice of species, I told you the species that work well here. But in your area, you might have other species that you see just keep coming back and coming back and coming back. And you might even consider them problematic. Well, if they're tree species, then use those. Coppice them or pollard them. Use that material to do your soil building. And but plant those native species so that the birds and the other animals go and eat in there instead of in your garden. Any other questions?
Yes, the questions about starting a garden, but the garden is full of weed. So she asked if you recommend the cardboard and what are the kind of advice.
Yes, and actually we've got a couple videos where we show that we did this in briefly in the video. That's the our very first garden that we put here, the 400 square meter garden, a 1/10 of an acre garden. It was, we moved in, it was the beginning of December, and by the beginning of January, no, by the end of December, we had the cardboard on 2/3 of it down. And just before the end of December, we had a whole bunch of, at that time we used triple mix. We had some triple mix delivered. We were lucky, we found one person that was still delivering it at the end of December here, where everything was frozen. The people around us were really impressed. They're gardening in December, but we just, because we wanted to have our garden ready for the spring, and it would have been easier if we had been here in September, October. The best time to put that cardboard down is September, October, because the thing is, you don't necessarily need to put all sorts of triple mix on top. If you put that cardboard down in September, October, and you weigh it down with whatever, then that grass is going to be so dead in the spring that you can almost just remove the cardboard and plant directly in what's beneath. However, what was a little bit easier for us was we laid that cardboard down, and like I said, it was December for us, and we put, it ended up being about, I'd say, 8 inches or 20 centimeters of, if that, probably wasn't even that in some spots, of triple mix on top of that, and planted directly into that in the spring. And the cardboard by the spring was completely decomposed. Now, if you use cardboard, don't forget to pull off the tape, because the tape, a few pieces of tape I missed. 5 years later, they're still in the garden though. I still find pieces now and then of that original tape from 5.5 years ago. Any other questions?
Wait a minute. No other question right now. You can continue with another subject.
Okay. So, here's one question about what not to plant in your garden, but certainly plant it elsewhere. I said it earlier, but I'm going to say it again quickly. Mint, sunchokes, or Jerusalem artichokes, stinging nettle are fantastic to have. And we actually have them in our garden, but they create a little bit of extra work for us, because we're having to pull them out when we want to put other stuff, when they've, let's say, stopped doing their main producing. Actually, we don't have sunchokes in the garden, but I'm talking mint and stinging nettle. Better to place them elsewhere so that they don't give you any trouble, but they're really great to have. Another question, people ask how much should you plant? Well, the important question here, obviously it's two-pronged, is how much do you need, how much do you want, and then the second part of that question is how much space you have. It's really important to give the plants the space they need. Now, my problem generally has been that I plant too much. I've always planted too much. Even this year, in some areas, I've planted too much. One area where I really disciplined myself this year was my tomatoes. In a spot where I used to plant 40 to 60 tomatoes, I only have 12 tomato plants in that spot now. Now, there were two reasons why I planted too much. First was I thought, well, what if some die? What if some get eaten by bugs? What if some this? What if some that? Or I just said, I want a lot, so I want a lot. But, when you plant too much, many problems can happen. First, the plant's not going to grow very well if it doesn't have enough space. Second, if one plant gets sick, it's going to spread quickly to the other ones, especially with tomatoes and the blight. And so that's the reason why you want to avoid that. Now, the other reason why I would plant too much was I didn't want weed pressure. I figured I'd prefer to remove vegetables than weeds if I got too many vegetables. But of course, my problem was I'd always have a rough time pulling out those vegetables. Now, if they're edible like squash, and I have too many squash plants, then I'll pull some out and bring them in for supper because the vines are edible. Now, what you do instead is you give those plants the space you need, and then you companion plant in those empty spaces. So for instance, with the tomatoes, that row of tomatoes, let's say you got a row of tomatoes and you've got them really spaced out. Now, on, let's say, the outside of the row where there's going to be more sunlight, because on one side there's going to be more and one side there's going to be less, let's say. Well, on the sunny side, between those plants, but not exactly between them, a little bit on the outside, I'll plant, for example, with tomatoes, dill, lettuce, basil. And none of those plants are going to shade out the tomatoes. None of them are going to take them over. eventually, and if you planted them in between the tomatoes, they wouldn't grow very well because the tomatoes will eventually shade them off. That's why I say a little bit on the outside, and then they will benefit the tomatoes in many ways. Carrots, another good one for tomatoes. Um, but the lettuce, when you've harvested it, just as the tomatoes are starting to get big, then you don't pull the roots and you let that plant spike up into a flower head. It's going to be really tall. It's going to attract pollinators to your tomatoes, and that tall flower head is also going to act as a bit of a trellis for those extra tomato branches that grow out. Same thing with dill. Once you've harvested as much of the, let's say, leaves as you want, you let that dill grow real tall, put out its seeds. It's also going to attract pollinators and help the tomatoes, kind of help them stay standing like extra tomato cage. And of course, basil's always small. The basil benefits tomatoes in many, many ways. And so that's the thing. What's important is giving the plants their space, and in order to cut down, let's say, on the weeds, while you choose other plants that are going to benefit them. And I've got a lot of videos about companion planting that can help you with that. This tomato example was one example of that. Okay, let's look at some of the other questions that were asked. Let's say some of the easiest vegetables, well, easy compared to difficult. Okay, for instance, brassicas. Very important family of vegetables because they're so beneficial and healthy. But what I can tell you is cabbage is easier than broccoli and cauliflower. Although some of you may find broccoli and cauliflower super easy, and that's wonderful. For some reason, I've had some challenges with it. Last year it went real well. And kale is easier than cabbage. So in that family, let's say kale, and also another one is kohlrabi. Kale and kohlrabi are amongst the easiest, followed by cabbage, and then broccoli and cauliflower. Another one in that family, other ones that obviously in that family that are really easy are mustard and also radishes. Other plants that are really easy obviously are peas, beans, corn, squash. They all grow easily and quickly. And tomatoes are easy enough, and actually tomatoes are a bit tolerant of shade as well, so that's really good. And okay, another question.
Yes, I have a question because of the artist, he lives in the suburb and he's not able to, he has a limited amount of plants he can put in his garden for the birds not to eat the flower squash but to eat other flowers. Do you have a kind of recommendation to have maybe native flowers, things like that, to just control the birds?
Okay,
more?
so
He's in a suburb.
So he has less space.
Less space.
Yes. Okay. So what I would suggest for you with less space is there are plants that you can choose that will feed you and also the birds, but and they will help you in different ways. So earlier I talked about blackcap raspberries. I talked about raspberries, blackberries. These are shrubs that eventually grow very abundantly, and we have them here, and the birds eat from them, but we also eat from them, and so that could help. So choosing plants that will attract your birds and also feed you. That's one thing. The other thing is you can plant stuff that will repel either birds or other animals around your plants. And for example, herbs, which will feed you because herbs are so useful in the kitchen. They're medicinal and they're important. We need to get our bitters. And I'm talking, there's a huge, wide variety of it. There's obviously the obvious ones like sage and dill and thyme and rosemary and so on. Although here rosemary isn't perennial, but sage and lavender and thyme all are very, very helpful. But then there are others like yarrow. You stop cutting a part of your lawn, you'll likely have yarrow growing there. And yarrow will often repel different animals, for instance, deer. And it may actually, I believe birds might eat that yarrow seed, and so they'll choose that over your plants maybe. And so try and get as many aromatic plants into your garden as possible that are also useful and that you can use yourselves. There are also native species, but you see, depending on where you are, they will vary. For instance, here we have a lot of nannyberry that we planted or that we protected in the forest from the buckthorn so that it would develop. Nannyberry is Viburnum lentigo, and it's a native fruit. It produces abundantly, and it tastes like prunes. It makes a juice, especially if you mix it with wild grape or elderberry. It makes a juice to die for. Now, of course, I love prune juice, but that's what it kind of reminds me of. And so those are another one is high bush cranberry. Birds love it. You could plant a bit of that. It could feed you, and it also could feed the birds. But definitely get some aromatic plants into your garden because that might distract them. Always biodiversity, and if you can get that biodiversity as well with everything that's something that you can use in the kitchen or in the house, then you're really doing well, because the more variety you have, even in a small space, the stronger and healthier will be your plants, the more they will resist disease, and the more they will distract the bugs and the animals from foraging, because instead of having one of something or three of something in a large space, if you have 20 of something or 50 of something, even in a small space, then you're going to do a lot better.
Do you have a question here?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so the question is that I put a bunch of wood chips down in my garden,
Yeah.
and now I have black mushrooms growing everywhere. Is that something I need to worry about?
Okay. Well, there are two things to say about that. First of all, no, mushrooms are actually not something to worry about. Mushrooms are an indicator of health, and pretty well, most of mushrooms that you'll see growing in your garden are going to be benefiting your plants because they create that mycorrhizal network that your plants need to be able to share their share their properties with each other, especially the ones that are related to each other, and also to simply be healthy, because the mushroom mycorrhizal network will give stuff to the plants that they can't get themselves. They attach the mycorrhizal network attaches itself to the roots, and those plants benefit a great deal and also give to those mushrooms. Now, what I would suggest to you is that you try and identify those mushrooms. I'm not an expert on mushrooms. We have a number that we grow here that we can eat, but we also have probably 5 times more that I haven't identified yet. And so obviously if you haven't identified your mushrooms, you don't want to do anything with them. But if you can get them a firm identification, and if it's something that is edible, then that would be great. But you have to be 100% sure of that. And so, no, mushrooms are not a problem. They're actually great to have. They're important to have. So now, the other part of the answer, however, about the wood chips is wood chips is fine as a mulch in the garden. However, it's not ideal for 2 reasons. First of all, if you eventually are working those wood chips into the soil, you're actually going to give yourself problems, because those wood chips are going to take a long time to break down inside the soil. And while they're breaking down, they're going to rob some of the nitrogen from the soil. And if they're really at the root level where the roots are developing, then the roots aren't going to get as much nitrogen. So mulch is something to put around the borders of your gardens, not necessarily in where you plant. The other challenge about wood chip mulch is the fact that it's a type of mulch that's great in the forest, but not necessarily in the vegetable garden. You see, because most of your plants in your vegetable garden are what we call herbaceous plants, plants that are like grass. Let's say they don't have a trunk, they're not trees, and so what you need in the vegetable garden is more of an herbaceous mulch, something like straw, any different type of straw, or weeds. Basically, you can use your weeds as mulch, so long as they're not invasive weeds, and so long as you're not necessarily including those roots or seed heads. And another good mulch, of course, are leaf mulch, because they break down super easy. Don't put them too thick because they become mats. Wood chips, something I would try and keep out of the garden, only because it can give you problems with your nitrogen.
And
Another question.
Can you make a specification between what is triple mix and what is compost?
Okay, that's a good question. So we are before coming here, we didn't know that we had access to that there was a compost we could get close by. So the first thing we ordered was triple mix, and basically triple mix is it has 1/3 of it is usually mushroom compost, and then the other 2/3 can be a variety of different things like there could be topsoil in there, and there could be some. To be honest, I can't remember the ingredients of triple mix, but the thing is that those ingredients will vary depending on where you get them from. So you need to ask your provider what's in your triple mix, and where does it come from, because you don't want, let's say, your triple mix to be full of grubs, or to have come off of a farm field that was laden in pesticides and that kind of stuff. So you need to ask about that. Compost, we get our compost from a mushroom farm, and we call it mushroom compost, but what it really is post-harvest substrate. And what I mean by that is it's an organic mushroom farm not too far from us, and they plant their mushrooms in hay, I believe it is, and their cycle only lasts, I think it's 9 weeks. They plant those mushrooms, 9 weeks later they harvest it, and all that hay goes out into these huge compost piles. And we used to pick it up. We get van loads. We go with our van and with our buckets that we get from wherever, and with bags and stuff, real thick bags. We fill the van with it and come back. But that became too much work, so we started actually ordering it from a local place that gets it from the same spot. But we've had to make sure that it's pure mushroom compost, because sometimes it might get mixed up because of how they're doing their mixing and so on, and so you want to make sure that if you ask for compost, that you get compost. So and it was so cheap to buy it that way that it saved us time.
So they say, where do you get your mushroom compost that I could pick up? Oh, okay. I don't know where this person lives.
Sure. Well, if you're asking me, then maybe you live in our region. When we used to pick it up, we picked it up. It's called the Highline Mushrooms. It's in Prince Edward County, outside of can't remember the name, but it's in the it's not too far from Sandbanks in Prince Edward County. It's about 40 minutes from here.
It's a highlight mushroom.
Yeah, Highline Mushrooms. Just look that up if you're in the region.
Internet.
Yeah, and can't remember the name of the town that it's close by, but it's close to the beach and all the rest of it. And so and we would pick it up. Now sometimes there's lots, sometimes there's not as much, because as it gets more and more well known, that even the farmers are picking up from there now, apparently. Okay, let's see what other questions that we had. About garlic. Our garlic we had planted in the same spot for the first 3-4 years, and it did okay, but we felt that it could get bigger. And actually, Alson Pine, one of our subscribers, last year when he saw our garlic in our video where we were harvesting it, he said, "Oh, looks like you got a lot of rain, a lot of rain, and your garlic never got a chance to dry up before harvesting it." And he was absolutely right. So much rain, and I basically harvested it while it was still very, very wet and waterlogged. It was great anyways, and it lasted us most of the year. But we tons of garlic, and so I wanted to plant more, and I wanted them to be bigger. And so last fall, when I planted my garlic, I moved it to where we had our peppers last year, and it's more drainage. It's a bit of a drier area in the garden, and I gave the garlic more space, almost, I'd say at least 30% more space than the previous year. And we got, well, as you saw in our video from a couple weeks ago, we got beautiful garlic, 565 bulbs of garlic, and that's not including the stuff that's spread throughout our garden that comes back every year that we use to just get the greens in the spring and so on.
And can you talk about the fact that the first time you plant garlic, it's small, and after that you have to select. So can you explain the process?
Yes, that's important. Also important to know what you're using to start with. So, for instance, you know, you can start with grocery store garlic, but you're not guaranteed it's going to grow because who knows what they put on there. If you do get grocery store garlic, make sure at least that it's organic. It shouldn't have any growth inhibitors on it. And or you can also order seed garlic from, as in garlic bulbs. When I say seed garlic, I mean bulbs. You can order them from from different providers, and that way you know your quality, and preferably from someone local, from someone that's not too far away from you, so that the conditions are the same. Now, but you could also start from the little tiny bulbs that grow on the seed head. You see, because when the garlic is growing in its last month, it puts up its garlic scape, which is the stem to get the flower, and then with the flower you get all these 20 or 30 little tiny bulbs. If you start with that, then it's going to take you 2 years before you get a decent garlic head. And so you're going to have to, you can harvest, split, replant, maybe eat some of them because you can eat them at any size. But one way or another, whether you're starting from that or you're starting from regular garlic cloves from garlic that you got, your first garlics are going to be small, because as with everything, and this is a really important point, whatever you're planting, and you plant back every year, either from seeds you collected or from with garlic, it's from your, you've grown garlic, you get your bulbs, you keep some of those to replant. Well, those cloves from the bulbs you grew, they're going to be adapted to your region. They're going to be adapted to your soil. And so they're going to do better every single year. And it's the same thing with all your seeds. Everything's going to do better the next year because it's adapted to your soil. And you eating your food that you're growing on your soil, well, it's also going to benefit you. You've probably seen me often barefoot. Very important to try and spend some time barefoot outside, because that's also going to benefit you. And basically, it's almost like nature around you is going to get to know you in a way, and it's going to adapt also to you, because the stuff that you prefer you're going to put back. And so there's this kind of like give and take going on, and it's super beneficial for the whole system, for you, for the system, for everything. And so yes, everything you plant is going to do a bit better every year. And so patience is the most important ingredient, and but it really pays off. And you know what? I mean, I started real late doing it like this. I've been gardening for 35 years, but for 30 of those 35 years, it was in little tiny plots, in a backyard, sometimes on a balcony. And only 5 years ago, and look at me, I only started 5 years ago, but those 5 years ago went by like that. But I feel like I'm 19 years old now. I'm healthier now than I was 15 years ago. Next question.
Okay, next question. It's about the cooking stuff, the cooking video.
Cooking.
Yes. So I'm doing more and more cooking videos. I have a lot in stock right now. And I just want to say by this live that actually my channel, for the multiple language.
Yes, we discovered yesterday that Magali's channel has access to dubbing in multiple languages. Yes. And so Magali's next video should be dubbed into English for any of you who want to watch Magali's videos and you want to hear her voice. Well, you'd always hear her voice because there wasn't dubbing before. What I mean is, if you want to hear it in English, obviously if you want to hear your voice, you got to listen to it in French and read the subtitles. But if you want to listen to it in English, you're going to be able to do that from this point on. And so that's wonderful, because Magali is a magician in the kitchen. She is absolutely amazing. And the thing is, over the last 7 years that we've known each other, I'm always bringing her stuff. I remember the first time I brought her huitlacoche, which is a type of mushroom that grows on corn. Its English name is not very nice. It's called corn smut in English, so it doesn't sound like something you can eat, but it's a delicacy and it's delicious. In Oaxaca, Mexico, you get the best quesadillas made with huitlacoche. First time I brought her that, Magali said, "What?" And that was like one of the first things I brought her. And it's been like that ever since discovery, but not just for Magali, for me too. Every single day nature teaches me something, or nature teaches us something. And that's another thing that keeps the spirit young. And when the spirit is kept young, the body's kept young as well. That's a healthy. That's why they say a healthy mind, a healthy body, and a healthy mind and a healthy body. But it's the healthy mind that helps the body to be healthy. Anyway,
Okay.
let's continue. And exercise, obviously, and good food
Yes.
and sleep, water.
Okay. So
Yep.
you can
Next
drink
question.
water.
Yeah.
So, do you side dress your garlic throughout the growing process with any fish emulsion or other amendments?
No, I don't do any of that. I mean, yeah, I'm sure that stuff would be good. But if I was growing a small garden, I'd probably have time for that. But because we grow all of our food, like literally, I plant probably 200 species. I plant 200 species every spring. But we have literally thousands of species growing here. And let's say all our gardens put together are probably about a fifth of or a quarter of an acre, which probably doesn't seem like much when you think of large farms, but we use zero machinery. It's all by hand, and actually I even prefer to use my hands in a trowel when I'm digging, transplanting stuff. It's all by hand. The biggest machines we have is a push lawnmower that's actually self-propelled, but it's a push one. And we got a battery powered, and that's battery powered, rechargeable battery powered generator too with rechargeable batteries, and a chainsaw. So those are, we don't have any machines bigger than that, I think.
No.
We've got a chipper as well, which is electric, plug in. It's small too, just a little thing. It's we almost never use it because it's just, we get wood chips for free so often. And so basically our gardens have to be as autonomous as possible, and it's the companion planting that replaces, let's say, that side dressing. It's the mulches that replace the side dressing. Obviously, fish mulch, fish emulsion, any stuff like that, that's going to be giving a real boost to your plants, and there's certainly nothing wrong with it. But we want to be as autonomous as possible. I suppose if I went fishing very often, I could get that, and but I don't. Although maybe someday I'll more fishing, but I rarely go fishing. However, I hope
Okay.
that's a good answer for you.
Yeah. So, she wants to go barefoot in her garden, but she has an amount of red ants.
Yep.
And it's a lot. So,
Yes.
do you have a tip for that?
Yeah, we now red ants. We also have those here, and we have ants everywhere. And ants are good. Also, they're good soil builders. Now fire ants or red ants, depending on your region, can be probably more fiery than other regions. We have them. They really hurt, but I've grown used to getting bit by them. However, I also know where they tend to hang out. Ants will often build their let's say their nest in a spot that's going to be stable. So under a rock, under a log, or if you've cut a tree down and you've left a stump there, which we always do, it'll be at the base of that stump because they're taking advantage of all that decomposing material underneath. They'll also move into areas where you've put mulch sometimes. And yes, ants can sometimes kill trees and shrubs if there's nothing else for them to eat, or if they really like that particular tree or shrub. But generally, it doesn't happen that often because ants, like anything else, well, if they kill what they're eating, then that's not going to help them. There always needs to be a balance. So if they've killed something, it's because there's an imbalance somewhere, not enough of other stuff. And the same goes with any type of insect problem or disease problem you might have. It's because there's some kind of imbalance, too much of something or not enough of something. And for us, the main thing that we advise for keeping balance is using biodiversity in the garden.
Okay. Do we have a space dedicated to vermiculture or just compost pile?
Yeah, no, we don't do formal vermiculture. I mean, that's great. I did it in the apartment for a little while. I also did it as a teacher in schools. It's in the classroom, really worked. I also helped other teachers do it when I was a teacher and also an administrator in schools. But now it's basically it's just we have compost piles everywhere, and you know what? It's compost piles. You don't have to make it complicated. All you need to do is you pile your stuff somewhere and you forget about it. Yes, turning is good if you want that compost to decompose faster. Um, or if you don't want, let's say, stuff growing out of it. But we don't bother with all that because we've got a whole bunch of them. When we need compost from there, we'll harvest from underneath. And so when we're harvesting compost, you could say that's when we're turning it. And so and because we're using compost, we're using our weeds as mulch, we're using leaves as mulch, and so on. Then there's a rich soil life, and that's the thing. That's why it's important not to use pesticides. It's important not to use fertilizers and so on, like artificial fertilizers, synthetic fertilizers, because those things actually harm the soil life. And they don't necessarily, well, obviously pesticides don't do your plants well because it's poison, but even fertilizers aren't, like artificial fertilizers aren't necessarily good because they're making your plants maybe look better and so on, but your plants aren't getting what they really need, which is in the soil. What you need for your plants to do the best is a healthy soil life, and how you're going to get that healthy soil life is always adding to it. Think about it this way: anything you take out of your garden, you need to put back into your garden. So, for example, you're harvesting all your peppers, you're harvesting all your tomatoes, or your tomatoes are done for the year, and maybe they had stuff on them, and you don't want to leave them in your garden. You want to put them far away. Maybe you don't want disease or something. Maybe they got blight. Well, you need to replace all that organic matter with something else, leaves, or anything that you can, because the more you take out, the garden needs to be, the soil needs to be replenished. You need to give stuff to the soil so that your worms, your fungus, your bacteria, your insects, your potato bugs, your not your sorry your pill bugs, those little round things that get round, all that stuff, all those bugs that are in the garden, they need that. They're gonna make all those networks under the soil. The fungus with their mycelial networks, but also everything else. They're gonna make all these canals under the soil, and that's where your plants, their roots are gonna be able to access oxygen. They're gonna be able to access water. They're gonna be able to access their minerals, and that's also why it's important to try not to dig. Try to dig as little as possible, and that's why what we do at the end of the season is we cover everything, either with leaves, with compost, or with organic material, like I explained earlier, so that any weeds that might grow at the end of the season, the beginning of the season, will be kept down, and then when it's time to plant, we just pull everything off, and we've got some nice rich soil that's been worked and turned by the bugs and everything else. You pull that stuff off, and you've got chocolate cake that you put into a bowl of milk. Delicious. Oh no, you're not gonna eat your soil, although. But anyway.
Okay. Question: what's your top beverages you like to make using the garden?
Oh, yeah, drinks like so. For instance,
Oh, okay.
the best is elderberry. Magali, we just found a huge bag of elderberry in the freezer. It was in a milk bag, so and there was no label on it, so we didn't know what was in there. And Magali just took it out from last year's harvest, and she basically, when you freeze your elderberries, well, when you thaw them, they come off well, even before you thaw them, they come off their little branches real easily, and of course they're also, you could say, partially cooked because of the freezing process. And Magali just puts that through a press, or like a juicer press, and it's just pure juice. Now you have to cook elderberry a little bit, lower heat. It's not like other fruit where you can just drink the juice pure, but just a little bit because you don't want to destroy its properties. And wild grapes, nanny berry, those and all, but also things like, for instance, you can add kale into milkshakes and other stuff, beets as well into milkshakes, and but what Magali has started to do recently, which is once again magic. I mean, you've probably all heard about zucchini bread, but have you heard about kale bread, about beet bread? So delicious, and it takes on those colors. Magali makes kind of like a like she'll blend up the kale so it's nice and
It's my
like
next
cooked
video.
spinach.
My
Oh,
next
it's her
video.
videos coming out, and then she'll mix that into her bread. What's it called? Dough. And man, is it good! And it gives such, just like zucchini, it makes it so moist. It's like a cake. And same thing with the beets and so many
Yeah.
other things. Okay, next
So,
question.
do you have any natural way to keep the aphids,
Aphids.
aphids down
Yeah,
or off the papers?
off the peppers.
Yes.
Yeah,
I had one ladybug this year.
yeah.
She was on the sunflower, so she has an issue with that.
Yes. Okay. Now, if you've got frogs or toads in your neighborhood, or even harmless snakes like garter snakes, then it's great if you can attract them to your garden. And how you attract them, especially frogs and toads, we've got hundreds of them in our garden, and all of our gardens are surrounded by logs, and some of the rows are got logs on their edges and so on, and of course the pathways are all wood chips, and so if you give these types of shelters for the frogs, they'll come in. But not only the frogs, frogs won't just use them as shelter. So will things like solitary bees and wasps, and which are native pollinators. They're also going to go after those aphids. But frogs will definitely go after those aphids. And for instance, if you're doing the Three Sisters, or you're planting pole beans, or anything that climbs, like cucumbers, loofah, birdhouse gourd, or climbing zucchini, then those poles the birds will use. I know there was a question about birds eating in their garden. We have tons of poles in our garden, and we always have birds in our garden because they will eat more bugs than your fruit and vegetables. Why? Because those bugs are full. They prefer the bugs, just like, well, no, I can't make assumptions, but just like pretty well lots of people prefer protein over other stuff. Well, and fat. Everybody loves fat, and so those bugs got a lot more fat than the vegetables, and so those birds go after them. So try and attract frogs and toads. Another thing you can do is make a simple spray out of different aromatic plants, cayenne or sage or yarrow. Mix that up in the blender, strain it, put it, and rather than use a spray bottle, because I don't like to make a perfect strain, I've started using a soap dispenser block. And so I'll put my mix into there. I don't even have to, I have to strain the big pieces, but I don't have to strain the tiny pieces, because if it's a soap dispenser, then it's going to spray that liquid full of all sorts of little tiny chunks, and they're going to come out nice and easily. And they're just going to, and they'll cover the plant, and they'll help you with your aphids as well. Especially if you don't have a whole lot, it's something that you can control by hand like that. If you got too much, then you do it the way we do, which is trying to get the plants to be independent. And once again, what's also going to help with those aphids is the companion planting, is planting those aromatic plants around your peppers. Around our peppers, we have yarrow, we have sage, we have basil, we have onions, we have carrots, we have dill. All that stuff is going to distract those aphids, and there are probably specific plants in particular that are better at repelling aphids than others. I don't have all those lists that I know off by heart, because I just make it diverse and hope for the best. Are there other questions?
Yes. In my yard, the ladybugs are always attracted to cilantro flowers.
Yeah.
So she said that I planted in many places to attract as many ladybugs as possible.
Wonderful. So that's funny because my cilantro always bolts so quickly. My coriander bolts really, really, really quickly. But it doesn't matter. Like you, who said this?
It's onion grass gardens.
Thank you, Onion Grass Garden. And so, yes, well, if it's the flowers they're attracted to, then it's just fine that the cilantro or the coriander is going to flower because that's what's going to attract them. And so, coriander is an aromatic plant. It's going to help repel most of your bugs. And if the ladybugs are attracted to them, thank you, Onion Grass Gardens, then wonderful. Plant it. So I'm probably going to plant more coriander just for that reason. And you know, when it goes to flower, obviously you're going to get the seeds.
Okay.
And the seeds are a wonderful spice too.
A question about comfrey.
Comfrey.
Do you have a kind of other plants who do the same thing as comfrey?
Excellent question. We actually only just planted comfrey 2 years ago, and it's doing real well. And I only planted it because I wanted to be able to learn about it and talk about it. But I had been using other plants instead of comfrey for doing the same thing. Comfrey's well known because it's got a real deep taproot. It's got huge leaves, and so it's well known to be what's called a bioaccumulator. That means it's got these deep roots, and it's going to get all sorts of minerals from down below that things like your onions with their shallow roots don't have access to. And then what you do 2 or 3 times in the season, you're going to cut those leaves down. You're going to put them at the base of your plants, and they're going to feed your plants. They're going to decompose and feed your plants. Do the same thing as the fish emulsion does. Now, there are many, many, many plants that do that. Comfrey is an easy one to talk about because everybody knows the word comfrey. Not everybody, but anyway, it's well known. But any plant with deep roots will do the same thing. Dandelions will do the same thing. And dandelions are excellent. You can eat those leaves in the spring before the plant starts to flower. They are delicious. I know you probably don't believe me. Give it a try. Mix them into your salads. Just put a little bit of dressing on them. Man, there's nothing better. And then the flowers, or you can make dandelion honey out of them. And anyways, so, and then when they start to flower, well, you can start harvesting those leaves, or even before they flower. You harvest those leaves, you put them down as mulch, they'll do the same thing as comfrey. Yarrow will do the same thing. Deep roots, mulch will do the same thing. Any of those big plants that come back, curly dock, burdock, these huge, giant, deep roots. Of course, people like to plant burdock to harvest those roots, and like in Japan they do that, and they cook them like this. It's very, very healthy. Anyway, but all those plants, so look around, see what grows. You've got some big plants, find out what they are, and then look them up. See what kind of properties they are. Obviously, there's some plants that might exist in your region that could be poisonous for this reason or that. You wouldn't want to use those. But the ones I named definitely will work for you, and it's what we use here.
Okay. So I have a questions here. Just a second, because I go through so much question and things.
Let's see what else I've got here.
Wait. Okay, just a second.
Covered most of these questions. While Magagie's looking for that, one person asked about my thoughts on breeding, genetics, and adaptation.
Oh, just a second.
Okay, I'll get to it.
Just a second. There's a question. There's someone who live in the city. He grow a lot of vegetables, but the rabbits have the vegetable in the city.
Yes.
So
okay.
Can you give advice?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Rabbits can be voracious. Beautiful little animals, but man, can they do a thing when in your garden? And in fact, we have a 4-foot fence around our garden. It's actually a 5-foot fence. It was just a fence roll that we got at Home Hardware or something like that. Just a fence roll that we cut some buckthorn trunks and we put them up, and we put that fence around our garden in our 2nd year and buried it to a foot down. The only thing that fence stops is rabbits. And because we buried it a foot down, and it goes 4 feet up because rabbits don't climb. but it stops those rabbits. So I would suggest putting it can be even a 3-foot fence. The fence doesn't stop anything else, but it allows us to use it, and it's helped us create the contour around our garden where we have all sorts of other species growing, which stop the other animals. For example, we have wild rose, we have currants, we have grapevine, we have raspberries. Also, we have yarrow, echinacea, all those plants, all sorts of aromatics that grow really, really, really big, like sage. All that stuff repels the deer and the other animals so that they come up. If it's tall enough, if the deer can't see the other side, they're not going to jump over. Our first year, we bought what's called a deer net, a deer fence, and it was like a mesh. But we took it down almost right away because it was trapping birds and it was trapping snakes, and it was that was the clincher when it trapped a snake, and I had to rescue that snake. And I said to that snake, "Okay, I'm going to rescue you, so you don't bite me, please." And because it was caught in there, and it would have gotten either grilled by the sun or eaten by birds. I rescued it, and it had killed, what's it called, the chipmunks, and birds got caught in it. So I just removed it, because our place is certified as a habitat, wildlife friendly habitat, and that was the opposite. And so the compromise was that fence that keeps the rabbits out, but nothing else. But what we put in there, and our contour is now at least 3 feet thick and almost 6 feet high, especially because the fence is only 4 feet high. But initially we had these poles that were 6 feet high, over 6 feet high, and then we strung the same material that's on the fence. We strung a line all around it, and that's what the wild grapes have grown on. And so they've basically closed up the gap. And so it's actually, most of our garden is pretty well, the covering all around is close to 6 feet high now, and about 3 feet thick.
And
so I can't remember what the question was for that.
No, the question was about the fact that he grows a lot of vegetables
in
the city, the rabbits and other animals.
Little fence, just a 3-foot fence, but you make sure you bury it a foot down.
Tu as dit que tu finis dans 10 minutes.
Okay, and so we're going to be finishing up in about 10 minutes. So if you've got any more questions, Magali will take them. And I'm checking my list here of, so someone had asked about my thoughts on breeding, genetics, and adaptation. Well, you can probably guess what my thoughts are, and what they are is, it's got to be natural. Humans, we're brilliant. We've done many brilliant things. I mean, look what we're doing with a little cell phone and a thing that didn't even exist 20 years ago. But when it comes to nature, nothing does it better. Nothing grows food better than nature does. Everything. For instance, I'll give you the example of cabbage, broccoli, kale, and all those other things. All that stuff 10,000 years ago was a single plant. It was mustard, and mustard, which is well known. It's the metaphor for abundance. It's the metaphor for blessings. Well, so the people 10,000 years ago, or more or less, they started taking that mustard, and they started, over the years, harvesting certain mustard seeds because it had this, maybe the stem got thicker, or maybe the flowers got bigger, or whatever, and eventually that mustard became broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, kale, kohlrabi, radishes, and so on. And it's a slower process, but it's something that can be done. And once again, the best food that you can eat is the stuff that you're gonna, in a sense, breed right there below your feet in your soil, because it's going to be adapted not only to your soil, that food, but it's going to be adapted to you because you're choosing the stuff that's making you feel the best, which means those properties that make you feel so good are going to be repeated and improved upon, and they're going to make you feel better and better and better. Nothing done anywhere else could do better than that, because it's the soil that's under your feet that's going to do that for you. I'm not saying we shouldn't trade and we shouldn't sell and buy stuff. All I'm saying is the best stuff that you can do is the stuff that you do in your own place, and you're going to be basically breeding through the choices of seeds that you make. And obviously you can do stuff like, cross-pollinate one flower to another. If you like the properties of one plant and another one, you can bring them together, like one type of pepper with another one. Whatever, you can do that. I don't bother with all that stuff. Everything is open pollinated. And so we get, for instance, we started with about 6 species of beans, but we, if I showed you one of my bean jars, there's probably 50 different types of coloring and designs on those beans now. We've got a ton of different things. And so nature takes care of it all by itself. Why complicate things? It's so much easier to just throw a seed in the soil and let nature take care of the rest. I don't know if I had anything else to say to that. Well, like plants adapt to their environment. But this is a huge subject that could, you could have a 3-hour video on just this subject. But the idea here is we're talking about there's a symbiotic relationship between you and your environment. But not only that, there's a symbiotic relationship between every species in your environment and every other species in your environment, including you, and including the species that are maybe problematic. Because when you think of it, let's just talk about some of the bugs that could create problems. Well, let's say those little those cucumber the cucumber bugs in the spring, those little yellow and black striped ones. Well, you know what? There may be years where they're going to be the only thing that's going to pollinate your squash. So you kind of have to be careful when with the actions that you take. Let's see. And also, someone asked how I got into permaculture. Well, I kind of answered that at the beginning. As a kid, I loved to garden. I've always been fascinated by nature, and I thought I was not good. I thought I was not able to garden. I thought I had I didn't have a green thumb. And when I discovered by accident that wow, it's just where you put it. It's just your conditions. It's just knowing a few basic facts like where are you going to place your garden? Does it have enough sun? Does it get enough water? And how's the soil? That's all you need to know. And then after that, it's details, knowing about each plant a little bit. But really, if you let nature teach you, you just throw something in the soil and let nature be your teacher. And so, once I learned that 35 years ago, like I said, I didn't stop. And I also started teaching at that point. And so every single class that I had as a teacher, we were out there planting stuff. And then when I eventually became a school administrator, I was planting stuff with the whole school. I was running the environment clubs and all the rest of it. And I was helping other schools with their projects and other school boards with their projects. As a teacher, I did the same thing. I helped other schools with their projects. But at some point I said, this is what I've wanted to do all my life. And so I left that life well in advance of, let's say, what a normal retirement day, a good 10 years earlier than I might have. But it's because I couldn't not do this anymore. I had to be doing this. I was just going to go crazy. And I couldn't be inside of 4 walls anymore, even though I was going outside with the kids as much as possible. Our bodies are made for this. Our bodies are made for being in nature. We need to be moving around. We need to be getting our hands in the soil. The soil has properties in it that are good for our mind, all sorts of stuff. I don't have all those details offhand off the tip of my tongue, but it's just when you're in nature, there's a million different elements that are interacting with you and your body that make you healthy. It's not just the food that you're harvesting from nature. It's everything. It's even those little insect bites that may be a little pesky. Just get your curly dock and rub it on there, or I've got another trick coming up next week and you'll see that. Anyway, okay. Any other questions?
No, all is fine right
great.
now.
So I think I've run through all my questions. So thank you so much. I should have said this at the beginning, but thank you so much for being with us. I have no idea how many people are with us right now and how many people have been, because I can barely see the screen because of the sunlight. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. If you have more questions, obviously this is going to be uploaded as a video. put them down below. Don't forget we got a video, a special video about stinging nettle coming up next week. I'm not going to give you the details, but it's anyway. And so yeah. Don't forget to leave a comment, ask a question, and if you haven't done so yet, then subscribe. Support what we do here just by subscribing. And I'd also like to do a shout out for our members. I want to thank you for your generosity. I'm honored, and I hope I can do more for you in the future. And so thank you again to everyone, all of you, whether you're subscribers, members, or you've just dropped in. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to just say hello, leave a comment, ask a question. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time.